Hare Krishna. I am Radhika Pyari Devidasi, and this is the continuation of the Mahabharat series retold by Krishna Dharma Prabhu. Chapter 16 Mighty Jarasandha. After leaving Indraprastha, Krishna had travelled quickly back to Dwarka. As he entered the city, he was grieved by his relatives, friends, and countless citizens. After approaching King Ugrasena to offer respects, Krishna saluted Balram and then went to see his wives and sons. Finally, he entered the palace of his principal queen, Rukmini, to rest. During the coming months, he heard about the Pandavas' incomparable assembly hall. He also heard that Subhadra's first son had been born and that they had named him Abhimanyu. Krishna was joyful to hear that the Pandavas were flourishing and he began to desire to see them again. Each day, Krishna went to the Sudharma assembly hall to meet with the citizens. Vishwakarma, the architect of the gods, had constructed this hall, and it had the special quality of freeing those who entered it from the 6 kinds of material sufferings: hunger, thirst, lamentation, illusion, old age, and death. When Krishna entered the hall, he would bow before King Ugrasena, then take his seat on a bejeweled golden throne. Although not Dwarka's king, Krishna was nevertheless respected as the most important person present. The city's inhabitants understood his divine status. They regarded him as their natural leader, especially after he had personally disposed the previous king Kamsa, Ugrasena's cruel son, and freed them from his reign of terror. Once everyone was settled in the hall, jesters, dancers, and musicians were called out to entertain the Yadavas. Brahmins recited Vedic texts or chanted hymns and prayers, and one could hear the sounds of mridanga drums, flutes, and bells around the hall, as well as blasts from numerous conch shells. Krishna and Balram enjoyed the various performances, and they resembled the sun and moon amid so many shining planets. One day, soon after Krishna had received news of the opening of the Maya Sabha, a stranger arrived at the Sudharma hall. Krishna gave him permission to enter, and he stepped forward with folded palms. The man introduced himself as a king from a distant territory, one that Jarasandha had conquered. He explained how the Magadha king had become more and more aggressive, how he imprisoned the thousands of kings he conquered, and how he kept them in a wretched condition until he was ready to kill them. He had managed to escape and had come as a messenger on the other king's behalf. O Krishna, O Unlimited One, we beg you to deliver us from our miserable condition. Jarasandha is as powerful as 10,000 elephants. He has therefore been able to imprison us just as a lion captures a flock of sheep. You are the most powerful person and are always kindly disposed to those who seek your shelter. Therefore, please act for our good fortune. It was well known that Krishna had fought and defeated Jarasandha many times, but the evil monarch had somehow escaped with his life. Jarasandha hated Krishna for his killing of Kamsa, who was both Jarasandha's friend and his son-in-law. In an attempt to avenge Kamsa, Jarasandha had marched against the Yadus again and again at the front of a vast army. But each time his army had been destroyed and he had returned in shame to his kingdom to rebuild his forces, still burning with hatred for Krishna. Krishna looked compassionately at the messenger. As he was about to reply, Narad Rishi suddenly entered the hall. The sage came before Krishna, who immediately rose with his ministers to offer his heartfelt obeisances. Krishna offered the sage a seat and personally worshipped him with arghya. He then said, O sage among the gods, it is fortunate indeed that we see you here today. You are able to travel freely throughout the worlds and therefore you know everything. Please tell us how the Pandavas are faring at present and what are Yudhishthira's plans. Krishna's question was significant. By his mystic power, he understood that Yudhishthira was desiring to perform the Rajasuya sacrifice, which would entail his having to conquer Jarasandha. Narada replied, My dear Lord, I know that nothing is beyond your knowledge, yet still you act like an ordinary man and question me. I can therefore tell you that Yudhishthira is as well established in his kingdom as Indra is in Amravati. He now desires to perform the great Rajasuya sacrifice, and he is making the necessary preparations. Even now, he is praying that you will go to Indraprastha and assist him. Indeed, he has asked me to come and invite you. Krishna thanked Narada for the information and turned to his chief advisor Uddhava. What should be done? Uddhava replied, It seems that you can achieve two things at once. By going to Indraprastha, you will be both enable your cousin to perform the sacrifice and bring about Jarasandha's destruction. Jarasandha has now amassed such a large army that the only way we can defeat him is in a one-on-one encounter. Only one person is capable of facing him in hand-to-hand combat, Bhima. If Bhima approaches Jarasandha disguised as a Brahmin, then he can beg from him a fight. Jarasandha is famous for never refusing a Brahmin's request. My dear Krishna, you should accompany Bhima to Magadha. He will certainly be successful in the fight if you are there to guide him. The assembly voiced their approval. The Yadus had already been planning how to kill the belligerent Jarasandha. This seemed like a good solution. Thus Krishna agreed to go to Indraprastha. Reassuring the imprisoned king's messenger, he took permission from King Ugrasena and his father Vasudev to depart, then rose and left the assembly. Krishna decided to travel in state with all his family members to Indraprastha, so he had arranged the Yadus in a long procession around him. Amid the sounds of bugles, drums, trumpets, and conch shells, the party left Dwarka on thousands of golden chariots adorned with jewels, silks, and flags. Soldiers armed with swords and lances and mounted upon great black horses protected them on all sides. The noble ladies proceeded in their palanquins behind them. Bulls, mules, and asses carried supplies and paraphernalia for the long journey. Krishna and Rukmini travelled in the center of the procession on a chariot driven by Daruka and Jaitra, his two personal servants. The party passed through the provinces of Anartha, Savira, and Kurukshetra. They crossed the rivers Drishadwati and Saraswati and then passed through the districts of Panchala and Matsya. Finally, they arrived at the outskirts of Indraprastha and sent an advance party to inform the Pandavas that they would soon arrive. When Yudhishthira heard that Krishna had arrived, he cried out in joy. Along with his brothers, he immediately ran out of the city to greet him. He ordered the royal musicians to play and learned Brahmins to recite sacred hymns from the Vedas. The Pandavas then embraced Krishna with affection and led him into Indraprastha. Krishna saw that the city was festively decorated with festoons, streamers, and colorful garlands. Thousands of citizens crowded in the streets as he passed by with the Pandavas on his way to their palace. The procession of Yadavas following him moved with difficulty through the thick crowds. They were all led to the royal quarters by Indraprastha's chiefs, citizens, and leaders. After Krishna had rested and refreshed himself and his family had been settled, Yudhishthira approached him to discuss the Rajasuya. My dear Krishna, I desire to perform this sacrifice, but I wonder if I shall be successful. Please tell me what is best for me. I know you will never speak out of any motive other than for my welfare. Therefore, I shall depend entirely upon your words in deciding my course of action. Yudhishthira sat in his hall surrounded by his brothers. An iridescent glow from the thousands of celestial gems set in the walls lit up their faces as they looked at Krishna, awaiting his advice. In the expectant silence of the hall, the soft murmur of Brahmins chanting hymns could be heard drifting in from nearby temples. Krishna sat peacefully with his hands in his lap. Maidservants adorned with bright gold ornaments fanned him gently with chamaras and fans made of peacock feathers. Turning to Yudhishthira, he said, You are fit in every way to perform the Rajasuya sacrifice and become the world emperor. But you will first have to overthrow the powerful Jarasandha, who has formed a near invincible alliance with numerous other monarchs. He has extended his influence and control throughout the middle portion of the earth and has designs on the rest. He is the biggest stumbling block to your plans. Krishna then listed the names of the many kings subservient to Jarasandha. All were Krishna's enemies, and many of them had been defeated by him and Balram in various battles over the years. Now they had come together under Jarasandha's leadership. With these kings united, their armies would be impossible to defeat. What then do you think should be done, O descendant of the Kuru? How will you overpower Jarasandha? Bhima leapt to his feet. It would not be wise to send out an army to oppose Jarasandha in his own province. We should challenge him to single combat. I have the strength to defeat him, and you, Krishna, are expert in policy. Arjuna always brings victory. Therefore, let us three go to Magadha and challenge him. I am confident of success. Krishna replied, This is my thought also. Indeed, the wise Uddhava advised me in the same way. I, for one, am prepared to accompany Bhima and Arjuna to Magadha to bring about the sinful Jarasandha's death. Yudhishthira was uncertain. He moved uneasily on his throne. How can I allow you to go on my behalf? He asked. How too can I risk the lives of Bhima and Arjuna? They are my eyes and you are my mind, O Krishna. Bereft of any of you, I could not possibly continue to live. Do not go. I think that even Yamraj would not be able to face Jarasandha. Pray desist from this determination to fight with him. I shall give up my desire to perform the Rajasuya. It seems an impossible goal. Yudhishthira's voice was pleading. His love for Krishna overpowered any thought of Krishna's divinity and unassailable position. Arjuna then spoke. We are born in a race famous for its valor and prowess. How can we, like weak men, shrink back in fear of an enemy? We are Kshatriyas. Our duty is to fight, and if necessary, lay down our lives in battle. There can be no higher act for us than to fight Jarasandha and try to rescue the imprisoned kings. If we do not go, men shall revile us as worthless. Such dishonor would be worse than death. Krishna agreed. Arjuna has shown the mood of one born in the Bharata race. We do not know when death will overtake us, nor have we heard that immortality has been obtained by desisting from battle. The wise have decreed that one should, by taking recourse in strength and policy, confront his enemies. Let us therefore encounter Jarasandha. Either we shall kill him, or being ourselves killed, ascend to heaven. Yudhishthira then became curious to know more of Jarasandha's history. Krishna explained that he had been born to King Brihadrata, a powerful ruler of the Magadha, when a rishi had blessed the king to attain a son. The rishi had given Brihadrata a charmed mango to give to his senior queen, but the king divided it into two so that both his queens might conceive. Both wives then gave birth to only half a child. The sorrowing queens threw the two halves into the forest, where a Rakshasa woman named Jara had picked them up. She put them together and the child suddenly came to life with a roar. Jara returned the baby to the king, who named him Jarasandha, or one who was joined by Jara. Krishna added, The time has now come to destroy this Jarasandha. Without a doubt, Bhima will defeat him in single combat. Jarasandha will not refuse to fight. Therefore, O king, grant us your permission to depart. Yudhishthira assented to Krishna's desire. Seeing your mind set upon this purpose, O Keshava, I consider Jarasandha already killed and all the imprisoned kings released. You will certainly lead Bhima and Arjuna to victory over the evil monarch. O Krishna, what cannot be accomplished by one who has you as his guide? The three heroes decided to set off immediately. They dressed themselves as Snatakas, students just finishing their education and seeking charity. Leaving Indraprastha, they resembled the sun, the moon, and the fire god joined together. Their wrath towards Jarasandha inflamed, their bodies appeared to blaze. When the people saw the three of them resolutely heading out, they considered Jarasandha already killed. They travelled east for many days. At last they came to the Goratha hill, from where they could see Jarasandha's capital, Girivraja. Sitting amid forest land, the city was beautiful with its lakes and grazing cattle. Fine mansions and palaces shone from the city center, and 5 large hills covered with blossoming trees surrounded it. Krishna told the two Pandavas that this region had long ago been developed by Manu himself, the father of mankind. The largest of the 5 hills, Chaityaka, protected the city's main gate. The three heroes ascended this hill and began to tear down its peak with their bare hands. They hurled boulders and created a landslide. At the foot of the hill was a massive drum made from the skin of a Rakshasa that Jarasandha had slain. Having been struck once, the drum would vibrate for a full month, and Jarasandha had it continually sounded to warn anyone who even thought of attacking the city. Arjuna and Krishna smashed the drum to pieces. Climbing down the hill, they clambered over the wall surrounding the city to gain entrance. The guards stood back in surprise as the three apparent Brahmins made their unusual entrance. Bhima led them along the streets towards the king's palace. They saw numerous attractive, well-stocked shops. As they walked past the flower vendors, they snatched garlands and put them on. They strode into Jarasandha's palace and made their way to the central courtyard where the king was performing a sacrifice. Girivraja's learned Brahmins had been witnessing fearful omens portending calamity. Thus they had advised the king to fast and to perform sacrifice to ward off evil. As Jarasandha sat before the blazing fire, he saw three powerful men dressed as Natakas and adorned with garlands approaching him. Accepting them as Brahmins, he immediately rose to greet them, saying, "You are welcome." Krishna told the king that his two friends were observing a vow and would not speak until midnight. At that time, they would tell him the purpose of their visit. Krishna knew that the king had himself made a vow that he would give to any Brahmin whatever he asked, even if he came at midnight. Jarasandha had them quartered in his palace and said he would visit them at midnight. That night, Jarasandha entered their room and worshipped his three guests with proper ceremonies, offering them gifts of milk-bearing cows. But his guests refused his worship and gifts. Krishna said, "O king, we have come seeking a special kind of charity from you, who are famous for giving the Brahmins whatever they want. For a great man, there is no charity that cannot be given. Even the body may be sacrificed for a proper cause. Therefore, please grant us our request." Jarasandha looked at them closely. With their colorful robes and bright garlands, they did not look like any Brahmins he had ever seen. But as they had come to him in that guise and were asking charity, he could not refuse. He said, "I will give you whatever you may ask. However, you three do not appear to be Brahmins, dressed as you are and decorated with flowers. Your long arms, smeared with fragrant sandal paste, resemble tree trunks. Your hands carry scars from a bowstring. You tore down the peak of the Chaitika hill and entered the city as enemies do, avoiding the gate. You have also refused my worship. Such behavior befits an enemy. I think you are Kshatriyas. Tell me honestly, for truth is the ornament even of kings." Krishna returned the king's icy stare with a smile. "Your observations are accurate. We are not Brahmins. The Snataka vow may be followed by Kshatriyas as well as Brahmins. And you have surmised correctly that we are enemies. Thus we have entered your city violently and declined your worship. We have come to beg from you a duel." Jarasandha was surprised. "I do not recall ever having done you any harm. Indeed, I am innocent of any crime. One who assails an innocent man receives sinful reactions which will send him to hell. I always observe the duties of my order, protecting the people and rendering them no harm. Why then do you see me as an enemy?" Angry Krishna replied, "O king, we represent one who desires to uphold the dignity of a royal line and establish religion throughout the world. How do you consider yourself religious when you have imprisoned so many kings? You even intend to offer them as human sacrifices to Rudra? To treat these kings as if they were beasts, who could do such a thing except someone as sinful as yourself? You will certainly reap the results of your sinful acts, for the law of karma is infallible. Although you consider yourself without an equal, we will soon crush your pride. We wish to free the captive kings. Know me to be Krishna, these two to be Bhima and Arjuna. Follow now your Kshatriya duty and fight with us today. Either free the kings or go to Yamraja's abode." Jarasandha laughed. "I should have guessed. My old enemy Krishna come in disguise to try to kill me after failing so many times. What sin have I committed by capturing kings for Shiva's pleasure? I defeated all of them fairly in battle. Therefore it is my prerogative to do with them whatever I please. I will not release them out of fear of you or these other two. I will fight. either by placing my troops in battle array or by standing alone against the three of you. Or if you prefer, I will fight whichever one of you most desires death at my hands. Krishna looked at his two friends. It is your choice, Jarasandha. Select any one of us for single combat and let that settle our dispute. Jarasandha preferred to fight with Bhima. He considered Krishna and Arjuna no match for his strength. Only Bhima seemed powerful enough. Bhima smiled grimly and clenched his fist. He furrowed his brows and glared at Jarasandha. They agreed to meet at sunrise and the king left to make preparations for the fight. Jarasandha had Brahmins utter auspicious Vedic hymns over him, and he smeared his body with sacred unguents that had been offered to the gods. He then placed his son upon the throne and bound his hair in a tight knot. Removing his royal robes, he donned only a loin cloth. As the sun rose, he went out of the city along with Bhima, for whom Krishna had performed the propitiatory ceremonies to invoke the gods. The king had two massive clubs fetched from his armory. The two fighters took hold of the clubs and entered a large roped-off arena just outside the city gates. They appeared like two mighty lions staring at each other in fury. At a signal given by a Brahmin, they rushed at each other, shaking the earth with their steps. The two powerful heroes roared as they came together. They each swung huge blows, creating fearful sounds and a shower of sparks as their maces met. Wheeling and dodging, they resembled two dancers on a stage. Onlookers were dazzled by their expertise with the club. They smashed one another with all their strength, but neither gave way. Each was as powerful as 10,000 elephants, and they merely laughed as the mace struck them. Soon both clubs were shattered, and they threw them aside, continuing to fight with their bare hands. They seized each other's necks and dragged one another around the arena. Each looked for an opportunity to throw his opponent down. Bhima grabbed his enemy and tried to crush him with his arms. Jarasandha broke free and swung out his leg, trying to unbalance Bhima. Sometimes they raised their arms, sometimes dropped them, and sometimes held them close. Lifting their fists, they aimed blows at particular parts of their opponent's body, and then suddenly brought them down somewhere else. The arena resounded with their shouts and the sounds of their slaps and punches. Both were expert wrestlers, and again they exhibited many wonderful movements. They clasped each other's arms and waist and pressed with great force. Roaring like clouds, they fought relentlessly like a pair of maddened elephants. By now, a large crowd had formed around the arena. Citizens of every class came to see the fight, and they gasped in astonishment as the two men grappled. The sound coming from the arena resembled claps of thunder or a falling cliff. The earth shook violently as they rolled out, locked together. Neither showed any sign of fatigue as the fight continued throughout the day and up until sunset. As darkness fell, the fight was stopped until the next morning. Jarasandha invited Bhima and his two friends back to his palace and entertained them as honored guests. Even though they were enemies, Jarasandha felt duty-bound to respect them. The next morning, the fight resumed. Again, it continued for the entire day without either fighter gaining an advantage. And as evening fell, they again returned to the king's palace. The fight went on for 28 days. Bhima began to feel it would never end. There seemed to be no way to overpower Jarasandha. The king too felt respect for his opponent. Jarasandha had never before been equaled in single combat, but it appeared that the Pandava was invincible. On the 28th day, Krishna considered how Bhima might end the fight. Since Jarasandha had been joined at birth by the Rakshasi, Krishna knew that he would be weak along that joint. Bhima should tear him into two. When Bhima was able to see him, Krishna picked up a twig and split it right down the middle. Bhima took the hint. Finding an opportunity, he threw Jarasandha to the ground and stood on one his legs. He then took hold of the other leg and pushed it forward. With a tremendous roar, he tore Jarasandha in two from the anus to the head. The king died with a scream that echoed throughout the entire city. The citizens were shocked by this cry, and they rushed to see what had happened. They found Bhima standing over the two halves of the slain monarch. As all the citizens cried out, "Alas!" Krishna and Arjuna came forward to embrace Bhima. The three of them then went back to the city and ordered Jarasandha's son, Jayatsena, to release the imprisoned kings from the mountain fortress where they were held. The kings came down to the city and offered their respect and worship to Krishna. As Krishna and the two Pandavas sat within Jarasandha's palace, all of the many thousands of captive kings bowed before them. On behalf of all of them, one king addressed Krishna. My lord, we can understand that our sufferings at Jarasandha's hands is the result of our own past sinful activities. We can now realize that Jarasandha's humiliation of us was actually providential, for it has forced us to give up our false prestige. We were proud of our strength and positions, and we simply engaged in fighting other kings for supremacy and wealth, thereby causing the death of so many people. Now we are in a helpless and wretched condition and can only depend upon you. This is our great fortune. Krishna accepted their worship and arranged for them to be given food and clothing. He then told them to return to their kingdoms and accept Yudhishthira as the world's emperor. Soon the Pandavas would perform the Rajasuya sacrifice and they should all attend. Jayatsena, who also agreed to accept Yudhishthira's authority, and after being properly installed by Krishna as the king of Magda, he arranged transport back to Indraprastha for Krishna and the Pandavas. Upon their arrival, Krishna went to Yudhishthira and said, O best of kings, by good fortune, Jarasandha had been killed and the imprisoned kings freed. Both Bhima and Arjuna are unharmed. Yudhishthira joyfully embraced his two younger brothers and Krishna. By your grace, dear Krishna, anything can be achieved, he said. Indeed, it is only by your power that anyone else can exhibit power. We are kings and rulers only as long as you permit. Yet although you are the unlimited supreme, devoid of mundane desire and hatred, you still appear as an ordinary human being. Krishna smiled and asked Yudhishthira for permission to depart. Yudhishthira then set a date to begin the Rajasuya and Krishna agreed to return at that time. First, however, the Pandavas would have to subjugate the other monarchs of the earth. Having bade farewell to Kunti and Draupadi, Krishna mounted his chariot and headed back to Dwarka. After Krishna had departed, Arjuna said to Yudhishthira, O king, I possess the Gandiva bow and inexhaustible quivers of arrows, as well as the prowess to use them in your service. I would like to go out and make the kings of the world pay your tribute. Allow me to go north and conquer all those kingdoms. Yudhishthira replied, You have my permission. O Dhananjaya, leave on an auspicious day after gaining the Brahmin's blessing. You will doubtlessly gain victory over all. Arjuna gathered a large number of troops and soon left for the north. Bhima, surrounded by a similar number of men, went east, while Sahadeva went south and Nakula west. Yudhishthira was thrilled at the prospect of soon being able to perform the Rajasuya. So many things would thus be achieved. His noble father would be raised to the highest heaven. The world would be placed firmly on the path of religion, and most of all, Krishna would be honored above all others as the Supreme Person. Soon the king was consulting with Daumya and the other exalted Brahmins in his kingdom as to the preparations for the sacrifice, and Vyasadeva arrived to further advise the king. Thus ends the 16th chapter of the Mahabharata series, The Mighty Jarasandha. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna.